Well, we have finished the reading of Macbeth, and we have finished the running commentary and all of those sidelong things we go into. And so this evening we're just going to look at the major theme. And that major theme is magic. And we're going to look at magic and a few other loose end topics that we have tied together. Though the name of the play is called The Tragedy of Macbeth, and even though it's a tragedy, it's written as though it were a history. When I read the play, I don't get the feeling that the play is really a play about Macbeth. He's the central character, and it's the story of his life, the story of his fall, but that's not what captures the attention of people. It's the weird sisters, the witches. It's magic that gets the attention. All those predictions, all those apparitions, all of those things are what get your attention. Macbeth does fall, and he does grow throughout. And perhaps more than any other hero in all of Shakespeare, he fits the most classic pattern. But he doesn't strike one as being a really great character. He always seems too small to be a tragic hero. He doesn't have the power that Leontes has in A Winter's Tale. He doesn't control his court. And he doesn't, Macbeth in his court just keeps the appearances. And when he does his dirty work, he hires petty murderers to do it. So he's not really great in that sense. He does have a few deep lines, and most notably his statement when he's told that his wife has died. But he is not a deep thinker. He obsesses about little things. And he acts as though those little things are what his kingdom depends on. He doesn't ask those universal questions like Hamlet does. Hamlet is a great tragic hero. Macbeth is a good warrior, but he doesn't set you quaking with fear the way Othello does. He's rather light. Part of the reason for the smallness in appearance of Macbeth is because he's ruled by his wife. She's psychologically stronger than he is. And she can direct him as though she were within him. Unfortunately, she's not so strong in being able to get her feelings out, and eventually they eat her up and she suicides. Another part of his apparent smallness is his fixation on details and the very small, petty things he tries to do to maintain his position. The greatest, for me, indication of his smallness is the weakness of his character. He's like a puppet. He's a puppet to the witches. He's a puppet to destiny and all sorts of things that he doesn't understand. It's all right to be a puppet of destiny. Most of us are, because we're not in control of the divine forces in ourselves. But at least other tragic heroes struggle and fight and grow through them. King Lear has all kinds of heavy destiny come down on him, but he doesn't, he responds with greatness. So the ponderous agencies that work on Macbeth are destiny and magic. And those are the things that we're going to talk about this evening, especially black magic. We're going to be very brief. We're going to be superficial about some of the aspects of destiny, because we're going to have a whole series of talks just on that subject. In an earlier talk, at the second appearance of the Weird Sisters, or Weird Sisters, we find that they are petty witches, and that their little cell is modeled analogously on the true Weird Sisters, or Weird Sisters, Wood, Skuld, and Verdandi, the Fates in Northern Europe. When we looked at that hierarchy of the Weird Sisters, going on up the line, we saw that it was analogous, following the same principle that all spirituality does, the principle of analogy, as above, so below, and that they were sort of like a cabal, or a cell in a general hierarchy. And at the very top of that hierarchy was Hecate, the queen of witchcraft. Probably also, if we could follow it all the way up, we would find the ultimate fates at the very top. Because they manipulate some of the forces of nature on any level, even the petty magicians that the Weird Sisters are that interact with Macbeth, they do manipulate the forces of nature. They're capable of magic. But we never question whether they are subject themselves to fate, that they are fated beings. And that's what I want to look into a little bit so that we get an understanding of it. In an earlier talk, I think about a month ago, we mentioned the fact that the fates were at the head of the hierarchy on the back side of evolution, the dark side, the night side, and that side of evolution paralleled the front side. At another time, we have mentioned that there is one hierarchy that is involved with creation and another that is involved with dissolution. There are fairies, for example, that help the flowers to grow and come to fruit. On the other hand, there are elementals that are associated with rotting and breakdown and things like that, all kinds of degradation, degeneration, all of those things. So, we can see that there are these two hierarchies. One, the hierarchy of cosmos, creation, building. And the other, the hierarchy of night and of destruction. Hecate is a moon goddess. And the moon is the queen of night, of darkness. The moon is also the vehicle of reflected light. It can't create any light. It reflects. For us, the moon primarily reflects positive, creative life and light that comes from the sun and the day star. The sun is a body that emanates light and life, and it is itself a living ball of fire filled with light and life. The moon, on the other hand, is a cold, lifeless rock. One continuous stone. From astrology and from other places in mysticism, we know that the moon is the material mother She facilitates everything that goes on in the dense physical bodies. She's the fabricator. The entire gestatory period, even skeptical scientists realize that there's association between the gestatory period and the movements of the moon. The fetus develops in the embryo, nestled in the womb, in that saltwater solution that is like the ocean, all of which is ruled by the moon. Even the 7-year periods called climacterices, wherein every 7 years we change our hormonal makeup. Those climacterices are directly associated astrologically with the moon. Drawing from another source, there's an ancient Greek creative myth that says the first thing that was created was darkness. And the first thing created in and by and from darkness was love. And the first thing that love created was the law. And that from that law, everything else proceeded. According to modern Christian mysticism, the first period of our creation, of which we are in the middle right now, is called the Saturn period. It's called the period of darkness and invisibility. In that period, we develop our will to be, the divine spirit, or the Father principle. In the second period, which is called the Sun period, the cosmos is alive with light and life and love. And we develop the life spirit, which in exoteric religion is called the sun. In the third period, it is the moon period. In that third period, associated with the third member of our threefold spiritual being, the thinking principle, the logic principle, the law principle, the human spirit, or the Holy Ghost is developed. In yet another Greek creation myth, in the transcendent realms there are 3 levels of divine beings. The creators, which do pure creative work, so creative that it's invisible to us. We would again associate that with the divine spirit and the Father principle. The second category of transcendent beings is the emanators, that draw on the invisible power of the creators and emanate the creations only in the pure form of light. The third group is called the fabricators, because they fabricate things out of the light. Not only the visible, sensible light that we see coming from the sun, out of which everything comes, from spectroscopy, then spectroscopy, we learn that the minerals, all the materials around us, are frozen sunlight. And some of them, like the heavy metals, are probably from other stars, because our sun couldn't have created those. And we see everything grows and lives by means of sunlight. That's the consequence of the fabricators. And the fabricators are again associated with the third principle, the Holy Spirit, the Jehovah principle, or again the moon spirit. We're trying to get at that principle of the moon. In trying to put all of this together, we see that a transcendent, a transcendent creative spirit creates in itself, emanates light, and in that all forms are precipitated. Everything else proceeds out of that. As a consequence, especially of science, we see that everything, all material interactions, and all creatures are subject to the law of action and the law of logic. Again, with that lunar Holy Ghost principle of the thinker, the fabricator, all of that is associated with the moon. Everything that comes into specific manifest being comes about by the law and is subject to the law. So everything within the universal spirit that becomes, whether you call it a creation or whether you call it a divine experiment, the universal spirit itself is doing the same things that we do in creating and experimenting. But everything, whether it is the manifest part of creation or whether it is the dissolving part of creation where everything is returning to the spirit and the creative activity is being reaped, or the creative experience is being reaped. Everything is subject to cause and consequence, to action and reaction. Because of this perfect maintenance of unity in two phases, cause and consequence, action and reaction, nothing is lost in the entire cosmos. No thought, no feeling, no idea, no form, no experience, nothing is lost. Everything is brought back. Everything, including the gods, is subject to the law as soon as there's definite manifestation. As long as the spirit subsists in transcendent realms of pure spirit, that is, like in the life spirit or in the divine spirit, where there is nothing but meaning and love and pure subsistent being or beingness, they don't divide anything. There is no subject. One is not subject to the law then. One is not even one. There just is spirit. But once the divine beings share and manifest the creative dream, especially when it's brought to the state where it is fabricated, they're subject to the law just as we are. So it shouldn't be any surprise to us that Hecate and the Erd sisters, the fates who weigh out cause and consequence, are subject to the law themselves, because they're right at the fount of fabrication. They're right where it ceases to be an emanation and becomes a thing, or becomes things. The material side of reality is also in the ultimate potential of space. The other pole of potential, time, is where spirit and spiritual character finds itself. But matter and in all states are in the potential of space. And there is that proto-matter, which all mystics call something like cosmic root substance, out of which all other forms of matter are congealed. That also is found between potential and the manifest states of material existence. That cosmic root substance is almost as subtle as space itself. In its subtlety, the pole that we call cosmic root substance versus potential spirit at the other pole, the cosmic root substance in its subtlety forms a resistance. The resistance through which the unknown of the absolute becomes manifest through the potential of space into this pure proto-substance. It's a resistance, but not a resistance in the same way that something like this is resistant. It's resistant in its subtlety. The resistance of cosmic root substance is exactly like the resistance we experience when we practice our inward creativity. As long as we maintain our will and our intent and hold our concentration, we can hold things into a state of existence. We can create things like there are on the board, or words like what I'm speaking now, but as long as that concentration is held, things are held in a state of manifest being. Let the concentration drop, and immediately everything goes back to like the state of cosmic root substance. It is a subtle resistance. It responds to anything we do, but it is incumbent on us in our creativity to continue doing, or else everything falls back into non-being. So our manifest activity, whether we're writing an essay, or building a machine, or forming a social organization, our manifest activity is the same as the universal spirit. We, as long as we maintain our creativity, as long as we maintain our will, we hold things in existence. Of course, anybody who tries to practice that kind of concentration realizes immediately that our efforts are terribly feeble. And it's easy to become pessimistic and say we're never going to get anywhere. But I think if we're encouraged just a little bit by the fact that what we're doing is exactly the same thing as the universal spirit, that should only encourage us, because there's no limit and there's no reason why we can't do anything or everything that the universal spirit does. Of course, to do everything, we'd have to be at one with the universal spirit, but that's a whole other subject. The law side is the matter side. It's associated with the dark side of creation, the side of form. It's the back side of creation. The front side, the creative side, everything lives and grows and is sustained as a statement of positive assertion of spirit. Now, it's possible for humans and even demonic demigods to personally identify with form and matter. And when we do, we lose that divine intelligence. We become possessive, we become dumb, we become blind, just like matter itself. It's possible for humans and other beings to personally identify with the law. And in so doing, they become vengeful and they become wrathful. And all of the unifying love is lost. to being the avenger of God. At least that's the way they say they are. It is possible for humans to resist or to identify with resistance, whether it's the subtle passive resistance or whether it's active resistance, and to actually fight against the entire creation, to know the intent, and to assert one's divinity by fighting against the divine intent. Obviously, it's an isolative activity. It's also possible for humans and other beings to identify with the dissolution of the cosmos, with the undoing, and in such case become a wanton destroyer. So all of these are the kinds of illusions we can get ourselves involved in. And if we put ourselves into these kinds of illusions and identify with them and actively participate in them, we are what would be called black magicians or sorcerers or destroyers or something like that. It's possible to identify ourselves with reflection, with the reflective qualities of the moon. And in such a case, we become inverted. We see the reflection and not the reality. The reflection is always opposite of the reality. It doesn't make any difference if we call it sorcery, or if we call it forces of darkness, or whether we call it magic or whatever. That is the consequence. It is true that even evil, since it cannot separate itself from the unity, even evil serves the good. That's not very pleasant in terms of consequences for the evildoers, who it is possible may sacrifice their entire evolutionary experience in non-cooperation. It's probably much more wise to take the easy way and be part of the divine creation and work with the building process. There's a line in the Bible that says that destruction must come, but woe be unto the destroyers. We have illusions because we're in this very dense, brittle material plane with most of our consciousness. And one of them is that the cosmos is a hard, brittle stuff. But all of the forms of fabrication are interpenetrated by the life spirit. And so everything really, even, I guess you can take material science. If you take it down to the atomic level, everything there is very subtle, very supple, very flexible. So this is a living, ongoing creation. It's not just a hard form. It's not like walking through a dress rehearsal or something like that. Because of this, and because the Spirit is always interpenetrated in everything that it forms within itself, nothing is final once and for all. It's true that once a cause is set into motion, it can't be unset. It can't be reset, I guess is the proper word. We can't have an action without a reaction, but at every step along the way, new creation can be brought in so that even the worst kinds of deeds can be modified and can be turned into something positive. So there is nothing that is ultimately final. I guess maybe saying the past is not the past, that's something you can't do. Or that you can't say that whether they took and tried to, I remember the Gang of Four in China. At the end of the Great March, they had that painting with Mao and everybody else there, and then when the Gang of Four fell out of favor, they airbrushed them out of there. Yeah. So that brings us to the some questions about the play and about life for us. In terms of destiny, but looking at it in the play, would Birnam Wood have come to Dunsinane if Macbeth hadn't murdered Duncan? Would it be a completely different world? My guess that it would have. Because things were already so far set into motion that they were congealing out of the ethers, because the pictures were shown to Macbeth of what was coming. It's very hard. Yeah, maybe Superman can play ping pong with himself, but if you've just spiked the ball, it's very hard to take it back. And even with body English, it's very hard to change it. So it's probably almost certain that Birnam Wood would have come to Dunsinane, but the circumstances would have been different. The intent and the meaning of the battle would have been different. Ultimately, in the long run, almost anything can be changed if one is creative enough. This is very important. We are creative free agents. And no matter how firmly fixed the destiny is, no matter what kind of mistakes we've made, no matter what kind of temptations are before us, we're always capable of interjecting new, creative, living force into them to change them into something positive. Some things may be highly destined. And if we don't have the power to completely change the circumstances and the forms of experience, we at least have the ability to change our attitude so that we can get the most out of them. So that we can have a meaningful experience rather than fighting them or becoming completely negative about what's happening around us. We have always the opportunity to be creators in our life, if only in attitude. That's quite a bit in itself when you think about all the people who are in states of depression. The weird sisters, in both cases when they interact with Macbeth, they don't mislead him with regard to events and things. The events and things that they present to him are true. They mislead him by inviting him to act within his selfish desires. And by looking at them with his own small-minded consciousness, which is obviously not big enough to deal with a foreknowledge of a bigger destiny. So in his case, he gets misled because he has all of these worldly, earthy, material things. Even the forms of being the king are the things that he gets misled by. It's the desires. So what we're trying to say is it's not the things that happen to us, but the motivation behind them that determines how we receive things. Macbeth has fallen, and his fall is quite severe. He has acted from mismotivation, and he has done wanton acts of destruction, killing women and children through murderers who are completely innocent and that have nothing to do truly with his political situation. If you look at his character, he was a brave soldier and he was faithful, but nowhere in the entire play do you see something of high-mindedness anywhere in the character of Macbeth. When he is king, he basically keeps the appearances at court. So he's a good candidate for being drawn in, for being recruited into activity in the dark side of things. All of that is borne out by the way that the weird sisters act on him. In the very first meeting with him, they address him by titles that he doesn't have. He finds that pretty impressive. This immediately, when he finds himself with the second thainship, and he has heard the predictions that he's going to become king, this immediately suggests to his ambitions, and through flattery and openly leading him, Lady Macbeth chides him into not just letting the kingship come to him through destiny, but she chides him into taking it by murder. The suggestions from her are very potent. She gives him the idea as though it came from himself. She doesn't challenge his pride or anything like that. She lets him think that it's all his own. When all of the predictions, the first set of predictions, come true, he's impressed. He's extremely confident. This method of suggestion is the same method that is used on the second time. And that gives us an insight into how psychic phenomena and other forms of magic are accomplished, at least on lower planes. In the second meeting, we recall that before Macbeth even appears on the scene, they're making their witches brew. And when Macbeth gets there, he's presented not only with predictions, but with apparitions. The formula that they use is basically the same as the first time. They try to assuage his fears, and they try to pique his or whet his ambitions, and they foster overconfidence. Even though the apparitions are capable of interpretation, we've noted that before, they are relatively empty in terms of meaning and in terms of values. There's something like modern movies. They're long on special effects and very short on satisfying content. That's the definition of the way magic works in our materialistic world. This is also the characteristic of black magic, which is focused on the dark side of things, on the form side of things, the phenomenal side of things. There's a big difference between prediction and prophecy. Prediction almost always has an element of vanity about it, for both the predictor and the recipient of the prediction. Many years ago, I used to do a lot of predicting, and I had reasonable success with it. And I predicted openly. And then I'd sit at home at night, and I'd look at situations. I remember I was looking at the potentiality of an earthquake in either South or Central America. And all at once it dawned on me, why are you trying to predict an event that's none of your business, and there's nothing that you can do about it? There's nothing you can help, and you don't even know why it's happening and to what you can do to help. There's always something empty about prediction. One is dazzled by foreknowledge, but there are those futile feelings because you can't do anything about it. And even if you can do something about it, a lot of what you do is of the ilk of Macbeth. Prophecy issues from the transcendent side of things. It comes straight from the source or the being or the stuff of truthing. As a consequence, prophecy is rich to overflowing in meaning and in knowledge. And the phenomena of prophecy are of secondary importance. They're just there as a form for all of that meaning to come through. Prophecy excites the intuition, not the senses and not the desires. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. When something is presented to you, does it strike your intuition? Does it give you inner meanings? Or is it something that, revs up your desires, or is something that's exciting phenomenologically? Before discussing the magic in Macbeth, it's important to note when it occurs. The first meeting with the Weird Sisters occurs at a time of success. Macbeth has just been a war hero and has fought a double war and has been successful in both. This is consistent with the laws of tragedy that go all the way back at least as far as Aristotle. It's consistent with simple common sense. A hero can't fall unless a hero is a hero. You can't fall unless you're in a high place. And this is very true to our lives. Almost all of our mistakes occur when we are on the upstage of a cycle. When we're down and when we're suffering and we've been humbled by our errors and it seems like almost every little misstep is punished, we're sensitized, we're humbled, we're conscientious. We're suddenly very scrupulous about sinning. Most heart attack victims become born-again votaries of healthy diet. And they're very careful about what they do. But when we're on the high side of things and everything is going our way, and when we have that hubris, that heroic hubris, that we think that everything is going our way because we did it, and we have the vanity to think that it's all because of our goodness, all because of our virtue, and all because of our effort that things are good. That's when we're most apt to become careless, and in our vanity to initiate new causes that are going to bring us right back to the downside of the cycle, which has to come anyway, but it doesn't have to come with that kind of negativity to it. This is really important to us. I've been studying spiritual things for something like getting close to 40 years now. And I've watched a lot of people aspire to unfolding spiritually. And almost without exception, the greatest failures came in success. I've seen people strive and aspire and try really hard to become better people and work on their spiritual exercises, and then they start having inward phenomena, and immediately they think that they're masters, or they think that they're great teachers or something like that, and then all of the things that brought them that very little bit of knowledge are thrown out the window, and their whole life becomes empty after that. It seems like an exercise in trying to prove how great they are, rather than if they had just lived, their life would stand for itself. since we're talking about Macbeth meeting the weird sisters, and we're trying to talk about magical phenomena, it's probably a wise idea to ask the questions, how did the weird sisters bring about the apparitions? It's a very difficult question to answer. One thing we can be certain of, it was not because of the witch's brew, which is there primarily for dramatic effect. Everything that went into the witch's brew certainly were things that nature magicians use, and all of them were potent for bringing one into the underside of things. Nature magic does work. Bob can tell us from all of those ugly herbs that he feeds to people that there are forces in nature that have properties that are more than just physical. But the only way that could work, death had consumed some of the witch's brew. If he had, it probably would have been devastating for the stuff that was in it. The only way I can see that the witch's brew has anything to do with the apparitions is that perhaps Macbeth inhaled it, and the etheric essence had the effect of putting him in something like a trance-like, suggestible state, and especially suggestible to the kinds of things that he was suggestible to. The apparitions themselves, in terms of mysticism, are more difficult to understand. There are a number of possibilities. It is possible that they could have been manifestations straight out of the consciousness of the witches. It is possible, if I really knew what I was doing and was really developed in spiritual things, I could stand here and give a talk and hold images, and everyone in the class would see those images suspended in the air. There are people around who do that, but I'm not in that kind of a place yet. But that's a very difficult psychic feat, and it requires a great deal of soul power. And I don't think that the situation with Macbeth warrants that kind of activity. And I don't think that the weird sisters would have spent their soul power or their psychic energy in such a piddling little thing. They may be sorcerers, but they're not completely stupid. Macbeth has already succumbed to temptation, and he's already following his lower desires and all of the things of the form side, the dark side of creation. They're not about to spend a whole bunch of energy to produce some spectacular effects for him. They do have to answer to his query, because the nature of the spiritual worlds is such that any question asked or any assertion made must be responded to. And when they are acting as agents and as agencies of the spiritual worlds, or at least the lower spiritual worlds, they are subject to the way the spiritual worlds work. So they have to answer. I believe that they're only too happy to answer, because every time there's an interaction, every time there is a giving and taking, the bond is stronger. And in this second meeting with the weird sisters, Macbeth is binding himself into their way of life even more firmly than following his desires after the first instance. What seems more likely is that the weird sisters are using things that are already in existence in the lower ethers. It's very likely that having Macbeth in a trance-like state or under their spell, because they have a good track record with him, he's willing to believe everything, and that's perfect for suggestion. They're perhaps drawing on imaginations and ideas that he has in his own subconscious. And they appear to him as though they were something outside of him. However, that's very difficult for a stage play where you have to have some kind of external effect. It's also possible that since we know that Macbeth and Banquo both have the Scotch Highlanders' clairvoyance, it's possible that the weird sisters are directing his attention to things that are coming into being straight out of the ethers, but because people like, got to close their car windows. Because he is so material, because he is so materialistic, those images coming out of the ethers are seen in symbolic form rather than like photographic pre-images of what's coming into being. I have very little experience with magical phenomena, but all of the above I have experienced, so I know that those are real possibilities. My experiences were minor, but clear enough so that I know a little bit of what is what. But I can't say with precision exactly what was taking place because the play isn't clear enough. It's even conceivable that none of the above took place and that it's all a theatrical ruse in order to carry out the things of the play. There's a little sidelong thing that I want to go into that I don't understand, and usually by trying to venture into things like this, it helps me to understand some other things. And that is the vision of the descendants of Banquo, which is the last apparition. It is the only prediction, and it is the only vision in the play that we never see come to pass. We have no idea of how it even will come to pass. Now, the first time it's relevant, because Banquo is there, and he demands of the sisters what his future is going to be. And he's told that he is going to he's going to sire a line of kings that is going to rule for many generations. Of course, this puts Banquo in the situation of also being under obligation because he has made this charge of the Weird Sisters. This is a really heavy thing. You want to be careful who you commit yourself to. I have a friend who is an ethnomusicologist who has been in Santeria cults and things like that where they invite the gods to come in and use people's bodies and speak through them and bring them the phenomena that they want and things like that. Well, this man actually made friends with a man that was associated with a nature magic cult in West Africa. And he was taken there, and he's not even clairvoyant, and he says, even without clairvoyance, I could see the phenomenon. What they did is they sacrificed animals, and they let the blood run on the fetish. And he says you could see things coming and snapping that etheric energy up as soon as the blood was let. And he said, this man, the witch doctor in charge of the whole business, as much energy as he can give to the gods, the more phenomena they'll give to him and the more power he'll have. It's a very competitive thing. that you can't let your thoughts down for a moment or you're going to get clobbered by other magicians. And one man from America, in order to forward his career, bought a bull so that there could be an amazing letting of blood. He had no idea what he was getting himself into. He was then bound in with that form of selfish kind of magic. I don't know what his future is. I guess he probably got all the promotions he wanted. But in the first instance, what happens is when Banquo is told that he's going to have a whole line of kings as descendants, Macbeth becomes jealous and insecure, and he eventually murders Banquo. And so you can see some relevance there. In fact, Banquo actually discharges his obligation by his death. He got that information, but he didn't live the same kind of life Macbeth did, but he discharged it that way. Perhaps it's possible that Shakespeare was familiar with the history of Scotland, as was his audience, and he was trying to engage them by feeding them this knowledge that they would feel close to. But that doesn't sound like Shakespeare. Why would he? Shakespeare engages people by images, not so much by overwhelming them with facts. He uses facts to get ideas across, but again, always with images. The only thing that I can see for the statement of that, it maybe had some political end, because Shakespeare was active on all kinds of levels, and we have to remember that he was writing for the Queen of England, and that branch of the family of Plantagenet was just about near an end, and he was maybe perhaps trying to put some kind of positive thoughts out there, something like that, because it's very clear in his plays on the War of Roses that he is very favorable to the family of Elizabeth. Often when something like that is anomalous to the play, that's a place that you look for something esoteric. But I don't think Shakespeare would put anything esoteric in a play in a place where there's a lot of evil like that going on. Did you have a question? Okay. We can wait till the end. I know. It just represented some kind of he's thinking, because he's associated with occult phenomena, they always have a quality of them, not only of magic and of special things, but they have a question, an air of eternality about them. And he's wanting that. It's almost like Faust selling his soul to the devil. Let this moment live forever. And somehow Macbeth has some kind of immortality in his mind, and he's at least trying to preserve his position as long as he can. Yes, not only that, but maybe he even thinks of himself as an eternal figure. Another more engaging and significant question is, why did the Weird Sisters mislead Macbeth if his destiny was already set? If he was going to be king, and if he was going to be Thane, and if he was going to be overcome at the Battle of Birnam Wood, why did they mislead him if that was already set? We again go back to the idea of it's not the form, but the intent. Yes, he was going to be king, but was he going to be king as a consequence of forces working in destiny in which he was not selfishly directly playing a part? Or was he going to be king because he actually made it happen? The answer to that question is found almost in the opening lines of the play. The first lines of the play are, "When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?" And the second which then says, "When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle is lost and won." That battle is not just a battle against Ireland, or it's not a battle against the Norwegians. It is the battle for the soul. It goes beyond Scotland. Christ Jesus tells us, don't worry about those who can destroy your body. Worry about those who can destroy your soul. Macbeth has been concerned about worldly things, fame, honor, power, things like that. Even toward the end of the play, when he sees the evanescence of life, when his wife has died, he doesn't show any moral compunction. He's only concerned about his own idiocy. He has no concern for his soul about the fact that he's been roped into black magic. He just said, I was stupid in getting things the way I got things. Oh, almost done already. In this regard, he is almost perfect for black magic. It's out of insecurity and self-concern that he doesn't care about anyone, not even his own wife. He tries to murder anyone that gets in his way, killing even Macduff's wife and child. It's almost like purposeless spite. The light side of things, the creative side of things, works in unity. It accommodates to others. The dark side hates rather than loves, and it tries to destroy. This facet of his temperament is not a good deal different from that of the witches, where they talk about doing all the nasty things that they do. But these witches, as we learn, are low down in the hierarchy, and so they vent their hatred in very, very petty ways. Further up in the hierarchy, things are different. Things aren't done from petty vengeance or from mischief. And further up in the dark hierarchy, it isn't a matter of mere nature magic. It is a higher form of magic that is done by soul power. And soul power is the essence of experience. It's almost like fertilizer. The experience of last year's plants becomes the power for the next year's plants to grow better. Soul power is something that we can only gain by experience. Destructive magic is a very exhausting activity. It spends a lot of soul power. High magic, high black magic, isn't wasted on piddling things or on piddling people. In the case of Macbeth, it's like it's reserved for greater things, for the recruitment of an individual for more soul power. Macbeth isn't just a dupe, he's a recruit. The second round of magic is to bind him in even tighter. The greater part of the career of Macbeth is not over with the play and with his death. It takes place after his death and his future evolutionary career or devolutionary career, depending on how he goes. Black magic is like a mirror image of creation and of creativity, which is what white magic is. The discipline, the lifestyle, and even quite a few of the methods are the same for students of the light as for students of the darkness. A lot of black magicians are celibate, and they live with the same kind of moral rigor, or I should say discipline, rather than moral rigor, as students of white magic and healing. But the black magic is always an imperfect counterfeit of the true creation. The form side is an inverted, reflective, projected reflection. There is a famous symbol from history for it. I'll pass the book around so everybody can get their this. It's the picture of the macrocosm and the microcosm. Macroporosis and microporosis. What we're saying here with recruitment and the need for soul power, we're saying is that there is something like an honor among thieves. Among baser people, like in the cowboy movie, where people, like they hold up the bank and they all go out into the Badlands and they start killing each other off, saying, that there will be more gold for me. That's with the lower types. When you get deeper into black magic, there is a kind of cooperation and honor among thieves. Evil magicians will work together and accumulate soul power and use it more effectively, just like we meet here to pray together, because we can do it more effectively. The ties that are bound between black magicians are just like the ties among white magicians and people of every day. And they're blood ties. I know a man who is, or was, he's probably certainly not alive anymore, who belonged to a school of evil. And in order to be initiated into the school, the final act is he had to murder somebody. And this was a drug runner, ran a house of prostitution, quite a few things like that. And he had the ability to communicate telepathically. So this was no weak type of person. It's much more difficult for the black magician, because the black magician has to overcome the repulsiveness that is in their selfishness. They become awfully disciplined and awfully tough. But the ties between them are ties of insecurity and of fear. And the banding together is a banding out of insecurity, which in some ways is not too different than the banding together in conformity. In inversion, we have it all backwards. No, it's all right. Thank you. Yeah. Black magicians, in their inversion, see everything like a mirror image and they get it all backwards. And there isn't any real spiritual substance in that. Any more than there is than you can get love from a mirror image of someone. It's empty. It has a vacuous quality about it. Black magicians, in their psychology, eventually get like rats. They do experiments with rats that they feed. They put a rat in a cage and they give it all the foods of any kind that the rat would want. And the rat chooses a balanced diet for itself. Then they put food in the rat cage that has licorice flavor to it. And the rat gets addicted to licorice. And eventually they have licorice stuff there that has no nutritional value and all of the other healthy things, and the rat will starve itself to death being hungrier and hungrier, eating what it's addicted to. And something like that is what black magician is like. They have to constantly be replenishing their energy to even feel alive. And that replenishment comes by drawing energy from humans who spend it and let it go wantonly. Or they do it by recruiting. Eventually, as humans progress and evolve and love more constantly, there will be fewer and fewer to recruit. And there will be less spent or wasted vital energy coming from people. And they face a very difficult type of situation. And unless they're redeemed, there's nothing that can happen but for them to prey on each other. They don't have a very positive destiny. In such a case, their evolution is for naught. It's a very sad and serious business. And it can start out with just simple selfishness. So the battle lost and won is a very important thing. Beyond just being phony in special effects. But ultimately, black magic is effete. It's based on form and dead form, and it has no creativity. This is where that old superstition comes that the devil can't create. Perfectly true, but it's not a very sophisticated way that it is being said. Ultimately, since the things of black magic, even when they use the lower psychic worlds, are for material ends, and matter itself is on the form side, the dumb side, the meaningless side, it means that ultimately, in the long run, black magic is stupid. We can talk about the metaphysical circumstances of it, as we have, or we can talk about the psychology of somebody that gets into black magic, but ultimately, it's stupid. It makes no sense when you take it on any level and you take it right to its root. It is ultimately senseless. So Macbeth, when he is cursing his stupidity at the end of the play, is on the right track, but he's cursing his stupidity for being misled, not for being involved in something that is in itself ultimately stupid. One who lives a life of love and is constant in that cannot be recruited. We ourselves cannot fight in the battle that is lost and won. We can live our lives, and we can love and give love to others to accept in freedom, but we cannot fight. We have plenty of motivation in compassion for those who have taken the dark side. We have plenty of motivation in the terror of their lives. But only love for the suffering of others is the force that can motivate us. Only love is truly strong enough. Only love. And that's it. Next fall we'll talk about white magic, and we'll start with the Tempest, and between now and then I'll get some books in so that we're all reading the same books. Books with a lot of notes in. I'm going to make scholars of you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, it's wonderful. Nice. Wonderful. Cool. It's wonderful.